1 hour before my son's wedding, I heard his fiancée laughing with a man who wasn't him in the church hallway. He's so naive. I'm only after the money his mother is worth $80 million. The man laughed. And the baby, it's yours, obviously, not his. I stood frozen behind that door, my phone recording every word. And what I did next, I made sure she regretted it for the rest of her life. Hey there! Thanks for joining us today. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Drop a comment and tell us where you're tuning in from. We love hearing from you. Quick note, while some details have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes, the lessons and warnings in this story are very real. Any similarities to actual people or places are entirely coincidental. I walked into my son's wedding knowing that if I did what my heart was screaming at me to do, I would shatter him in front of everyone he loved. And if I didn't, I would lose him forever. The thought sat heavy as I stood at the back of Trinity Church's sanctuary, watching 200 guests settle into polished oak pews. Afternoon light streamed through stained glass windows, painting marble floors in amber and rose. The air was thick with white lilies and gardenias. Natalie's choice. Everything today had been her choice. I'd learned to smile and nod even as instincts honed over 60 years screamed that something was wrong. The organ filled the sanctuary with Pachelbel's canon. Beautiful, traditional, perfect. Except I knew better. My phone burned in my clutch. Inside was a recording 2 minutes and 43 seconds that would destroy my son or save him. In 35 minutes, Jonathan would promise forever to a woman, playing him like a mark. I'd seen this kind of manipulation before decades ago in boardrooms, but never directed at my own child. And I was the only one who knew. I'd spent an hour convincing myself there was time to stop this quietly. Pull Jonathan aside, show him the evidence, let him decide. But every time I imagined his face, the hope draining from his eyes, when he realized she'd been lying for 18 months, my courage faltered. How do you do that to your child? 6 decades of living hadn't prepared me for this choice. But how do you let him marry someone only after his money, or rather mine? Laughter erupted from Jonathan's medical school friends near the front. Genuine laughter from people who still believe in happy endings. I used to believe in them too, back when I was their age. I smoothed my champagne silk dress, the one Natalie helped me choose, insisting I deserved to feel beautiful. After all these years, you'd think I'd know better. Angela Martinez, the wedding coordinator, breezed past with her tablet. Mrs. Winters, you look stunning. We'll be seating you in 20 minutes. 20 minutes until I'd sit in that front pew. 35 minutes until Jonathan would stand at the altar waiting for a bride who saw him as access to $80 million. I'd built that fortune over 30 years. I'd be damned if I'd let it be stolen by someone who'd spent less than 2 years pretending to love my son. My jaw ached from clenching a habit I'd thought I'd broken in my 50s. Pastor Thomas Richardson stood near the front speaking with an usher. He'd known Jonathan since he was 10, watched him grow from gangly kid to brilliant cardiac surgeon. At my age, I'd learned that good people can be just as blind as anyone when they want to believe in something beautiful. The weight of what I carried felt impossible. Stay silent and I'd be complicit in my son's destruction. Speak up and I'd be the villain who ruined his wedding. There was no version where I came out looking like anything other than a coward or a monster. I pressed my hand against cool marble, steadying myself. My reading glasses hung on their chain against my chest. The sanctuary was filling colleagues from Massachusetts General Hospital neighbors, from Beacon Hill distant cousins. All here to witness what they thought would be a beginning. None knew they might be watching an ending. And then I heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Laughter, low intimate, echoing from beyond the sanctuary doors. Not polite conversation. Something else. Something that after 60 years of reading people, I recognized immediately as dangerous. Something that sounded an awful lot like Natalie. My feet moved with the careful deliberation I'd learned over a lifetime. The sanctuary's warmth gave way to cooler hallway air where organ music faded to a distant hum. Here, away from the crowd, the only sound was my heels against marble, each step measured. At 60, I'd mastered the art of moving through spaces without drawing attention. I pressed myself against the wall, letting my eyes adjust to dimmer light. The hallway stretched ahead, lined with tall windows overlooking Copley Square. A long table held neat stacks of wedding programs. Beyond that, near the administrative wing, two figures stood close together. Too close for a bride 30 minutes before her ceremony. I recognized Natalie's champagne silk robe first. Her back was to me, but I knew the way she held herself, the tilt of her head when she was being charming. 18 months of watching her charm my son. 6 decades of watching people had taught me the difference between genuine warmth and calculated performance. The man facing her was someone I'd never seen before. Tall, casually dressed dark jeans buttoned down with rolled sleeves. No tie, no jacket. Young, maybe mid-30s. His hand rested on Natalie's arm in a way that made my stomach tighten. Not the touch of a friend. Something else entirely. I moved closer, each step careful. Years of business negotiations had taught me how to observe without being observed. A skill that hadn't dulled with age. If anything, people expected older women to be harmless. Their mistake. Their voices carried in the quiet space. After this wedding, we'll have to be more careful. That was Natalie, her voice lacking the sweet quality she used around Jonathan. Harder, more calculated. How long do you think before... The man's words cut off as Natalie glanced over her shoulder. I held still, using the programs table as cover. My hand gripped its edge with the steady strength I'd maintained through decades of yoga. She turned back, satisfied. His mother will never know. Natalie's laugh was soft. She thinks I'm perfect for him. Sweet little boutique owner, so in love with her precious surgeon's son. The recording in my purse suddenly felt heavier. This wasn't paranoia. This was pattern recognition honed over 6 decades. The man shifted. Good-looking in a too-smooth-way dark hair, the kind of smile that worked on people who weren't paying attention. His hand slid down to catch Natalie's, their fingers intertwining with practiced ease. "You're sure about the timeline?" he asked. "Everything's in place," Natalie said. "The accounts, the property deed, all of it. Once we're married, it's just a matter of..." She stopped abruptly. Pastor Thomas's voice echoed from deeper in the church, calling for the sound technician. Both tensed, then stepped apart with practiced speed. I'd seen enough corporate conspiracies to recognize the choreography of deception. The man leaned in his voice, dropping lower. "I can't believe this is actually happening." Neither could I. But at my age, I'd learned that believing didn't matter nearly as much as acting. That believing didn't matter. Acting did. But before I could act, I needed to understand what I was dealing with. And that meant going back to the moment everything changed. 12:47 p.m., 1 hour and 13 minutes before the ceremony. I'd left the sanctuary under the pretense of needing air, my heart hammering, as I moved through the dimmed corridor toward the hallway outside the bridal suite. The voices I'd heard had drawn me here, Natalie's laugh unmistakable, and a man's voice that didn't belong to my son. I found an alcove near the secretary's office, close enough to hear, hidden enough to stay unseen. My phone was already in my hand. I'd learned decades ago in boardrooms that documentation was power. Gut feelings were worthless without proof. I pressed record. The red dot appeared on screen. Then I listened. "So you're really going through with this..." A man's voice, not my son's. Younger, casual, amused. Natalie's response came easy. Of course. Why wouldn't I? Everything's falling into place. But what about his mother? Barbara's no fool. She laughed that same musical laugh I'd heard at Sunday dinners at holiday gatherings. "Barbara, please. She thinks I'm perfect for him. That woman is so desperate for Jonathan to settle down, she'd accept anyone." My grip tightened on the phone. 60 years of composure kept me silent. And Jonathan? Jonathan is naive, sweet, brilliant, and completely naive. He has no idea what's happening. I'm only after the money. His mother is worth $80 million. The hallway tilted. 80 million. The fortune I'd spent 30 years building reduced to a target. 80 million. Jesus, and he just gives you access. Not yet. That's what the marriage is for. Once I'm his wife, I'll have legal access to everything, accounts, property, all of it. I've already got him to put me on the condo deed. I'd advised against that. He'd insisted it showed trust. Then came the words that turned my blood to ice. Jonathan thinks love is about promises and commitment, but I know real love is defined by names on property deeds and inheritance clauses. He gave me his heart. I just needed him to sign the papers." Her voice wasn't angry or bitter. It was matter of fact, clinical, like she was discussing stock portfolios, not a marriage, not my son's heart. My son had given her everything: his trust, his love, his future, and she'd calculated its cash value. At 60, I'd seen manipulation before. Corporate raiders who smiled while gutting companies, partners who whispered promises while drafting betrayal. But I'd never heard someone articulate it quite so clearly. Hearts for signatures, love for legal documents, devotion for deeds. My hand shook, the phone nearly slipped. "It's just a matter of time before I have complete control. And then—" She trailed off. The implication hung in the air like smoke. The man spoke again, Derek, though I didn't know his name yet. "And the pregnancy will seal it," Natalie said, her voice dropping lower. I kept the phone steady, recording every syllable, every breath, every laugh that would have destroyed my son's life if I'd stayed silent. The recording continued, but in that moment, standing in that hallway with evidence of betrayal playing out in real time, I knew exactly what I had to do. Some mothers give their sons away at weddings. I was going to save mine before he reached the altar. Her voice continued without pause, as casual as if she were discussing dinner plans. "The pregnancy, it's already done. I'm 8 weeks along." The man's voice sharpened. 8 weeks, but that means it's yours, obviously. Natalie's laugh was light, almost amused. "Not Jonathan's. We haven't been intimate in over 2 months. My vision blurred. 2 months. Jonathan had mentioned something about Natalie being tired, stressed, with wedding planning needing space. I thought nothing of it. What couple doesn't have distance sometimes? But now, Jesus, Natalie. The man sounded uncertain now. "And you're going to tell him it's his—" "Of course, the timeline works. He'll never question it. Jonathan trusts me completely." 8 weeks. 2 months of no intimacy. The math was simple, brutal, undeniable. The baby she was carrying, if she was even really pregnant, could not possibly be my son's. "What if he wants a paternity test?" the man asked. Natalie's laugh was sharper this time. "He won't. Men like Jonathan don't think that way. He's too honorable, too trusting. He'll be thrilled. A baby will lock him in completely emotionally, legally, financially. He'll never leave me then. Neither will his mother's money." My free hand pressed against the cold wall, fingers splayed, trying to anchor myself to something solid. In 60 years, I'd faced hostile takeovers, market crashes, the death of my husband. I'd thought I understood betrayal. But this using a child, a life as a weapon, this was a level of cruelty I'd never imagined. "You're sure about this?" The man's voice had dropped lower, intimate. "I'm sure. Once he thinks I'm carrying his child, everything changes. He'll do anything to protect me, to protect the baby. We'll have complete access. And if things get complicated—" She paused and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Well, there are ways to handle that, too." Then came the sounds that made my stomach turn. Kissing, low laughter, the intimate murmur of 2 people who'd done this before, many times before. I pressed the button to stop recording. My phone screen showed 12:50 p.m. 3 minutes. I'd captured 3 minutes that would destroy my son's world. Or save it. My hands were shaking so violently I nearly dropped the phone. I pressed my back against the wall, forcing myself to breathe through the nausea. The hallway seemed to spin the air too thin, too thick, all at once. A baby. She was going to trap my son with a baby that wasn't his, make him responsible for another man's child while she systematically drained him, drained us of everything we had. I thought of Jonathan's face when he'd told me about the wedding, the joy in his eyes. "She's the one, Mom. I know it." He'd been so sure, so happy. The same way he'd been sure about everything in his life, medical school, his specialty, his career. My son had never learned to doubt, never learned that sometimes people lie with smiles on their faces. But I had learned. 60 years of life had taught me that lesson over and over. I looked at my phone again. 12:50 p.m. The wedding was at 1 hour and 10 minutes. 70 minutes to decide whether to detonate my son's life or let him walk into a trap that would destroy him, slowly, methodically, completely. 70 minutes to choose between being the mother who ruined his wedding day or the mother who let him marry his own destruction. My legs felt weak, but I pushed off the wall. My hands still shook, but I tightened my grip on the phone. The recording was there, time-stamped, undeniable. Evidence. And I had 70 minutes to figure out what the hell to do with it. I couldn't stay in that hallway. My legs carried me toward the nearest restroom, my hand gripping the phone like it was the only solid thing left. The restroom was empty. I locked myself in a stall and leaned against the cool metal door, forcing air into my lungs. In, out. The breathing exercises I'd learned decades ago during my first major acquisition. Ground yourself. Think clearly. After a few minutes, I splashed cold water on my face. The woman staring back at me in the mirror looked older than 60, pale jaw tight, but steady. I needed privacy. Real privacy. My car was parked in the side lot. I walked there with measured steps, nodding at guests. Smile, nod. Everything's fine. Just the mother of the groom taking a moment. Inside, I locked the doors and gripped the steering wheel. The leather was warm from the sun, tangible, real. My phone sat on the passenger seat. 12:55 p.m., 65 minutes left. The question wasn't whether to tell Jonathan. That had never been a question. The question was when and how. I could march into the bridal suite right now, play the recording, watch Natalie's mask shatter. But Jonathan wasn't there. He was with his groomsmen, laughing unaware. Confronting Natalie alone would give her time to spin lies to turn my son against me before he heard the truth. I could wait until the ceremony stand during "Speak now or forever hold your peace." Dramatic. Public. But it would humiliate Jonathan in front of everyone. That wasn't protection. That was cruelty. No. The right time was just before the ceremony. Private. In the groom's room. Give him the recording, let him hear it himself. Protect him from public humiliation while giving him the truth. The decision settled over me like armor. I closed my eyes and a memory surfaced unbidden. 18 months ago, Sunday dinner at my house. Jonathan had called that morning asking if he could bring someone. "Someone special, Mom." She'd walked into my dining room like sunshine. Natalie, 29, with an easy laugh and a boutique in the South End. She'd complimented my home, asked about my business, listened with apparent fascination. She'd touched Jonathan's arm, constantly looked at him like he hung the moon. "Your son is the most incredible man I've ever met, Mrs. Winters," she'd said, eyes shining. "I feel so lucky." Jonathan's face had been radiant, hopeful in a way I hadn't seen since before his father died. And I'd wanted so badly to believe her. But even then, something had felt rehearsed, too perfect. I dismissed it as a mother's overprotectiveness. I opened my eyes. 1:10 p.m., 50 minutes. Time to go back. The sanctuary was filling when I returned. Natalie stood near the entrance in her champagne robe, greeting guests with that same luminous smile. Perfect. Gracious. The beloved bride. She touched an elderly aunt's arm with practiced sympathy, laughed at a groomsman's joke with genuine seeming delight. She was good, I'd give her that. But I was better. I'd spent 60 years learning to see past performance to truth, and now I knew exactly what truth looked like. It looked like a recording timestamp. It looked like evidence. It looked like a mother who would do whatever it took to protect her child. Standing there in the sanctuary watching Natalie work the room with practiced charm, my mind kept circling back through the months I'd spent dismissing my own instincts. The signs had been there all along. I'd just been too willing to believe my son had found happiness. 15 months ago, Jonathan's apartment in Back Bay a Sunday afternoon. He'd invited me over, nervous energy radiating off him. Mom Natalie's boutique is struggling with rent. Just temporarily, the holiday season was slow. I'm going to help her out. $18,000 for a few months until she gets back on her feet. $18,000. I'd felt my stomach tighten, but I'd smiled. "That's generous of you." "It's an investment in our future," he'd said, eyes bright. "She's building something real." Natalie had called me later that week to thank me for understanding. Her voice had been sweet, apologetic. I would never ask if I wasn't desperate, but Jonathan insisted, and I'm so grateful to have him, to have both of you supporting me. I'd hung up feeling vaguely manipulated, but told myself I was being paranoid. I should have trusted that feeling. By 10 months ago, the requests had escalated. Mom Natalie needs a co-signer for a business loan, $60,000. The bank won't approve her a loan, but with my income and credit. Jonathan had been in my kitchen, coffee growing cold between us. I know it's a lot, but it's legitimate. She has a business plan projections. This could really take off. Jonathan. I'd set down my cup carefully. That's a legal obligation. If something goes wrong... Nothing's going wrong. His voice had gone sharp defensive. Why do you always assume the worst Natalie is trying to build a life with me? This is what partners do. They support each other. The word always had stung, as if I'd been criticizing her from the start when I'd been nothing but welcoming. But I'd backed off. Let him sign the papers. Watched him bind himself legally to a woman I'd known for less than a year. At 60 years old, I'd seen enough corporate partnerships dissolve in lawsuits and recrimination. I should have fought harder. The pregnancy hint had come a month ago. Lunch at a cafe in Beacon Hill, Natalie across from me with that luminous smile. Jonathan and I have been talking about starting a family. She'd said, touching her stomach in a gesture that felt rehearsed. After the wedding, of course. But we both want children right away. Life's too short to wait, don't you think? She'd been watching my face, gauging my reaction, and I'd felt it again, that sense of being played of lines delivered for effect rather than spoken from the heart. 2 days later, Jonathan had called practically vibrating with joy. Mom Natalie thinks she might be pregnant. We're not sure yet, but God, can you imagine I might be a father? The timing had been too convenient, right before the wedding when any hesitation on his part would seem monstrous. What kind of man leaves his pregnant fiancée? Standing in the sanctuary now, the pattern was so obvious it made me sick. Love bombing, financial entanglement, isolation from the people who questioned her, and finally the ultimate trap, a baby to make leaving unthinkable. I'd seen variations of this in business for decades. Hostile takeovers disguised as partnerships, predators who smile while they strip assets. How had I not seen it in my own son's life? Because I'd wanted to believe. Because Jonathan was happy and I'd wanted him to stay happy. Because I'd told myself that my concerns were just a mother's overprotectiveness, not 60 years of hard-won instinct screaming warnings I'd chosen to ignore. Angela Martinez appeared at my elbow, clipboard in hand. Mrs. Winters, 30 minutes to ceremony. We'll be seating family soon. 30 minutes. My hand steadied. My breathing slowed. The time for regret was over. The time for action was now. I looked toward the hallway that led to the groom's preparation room. Somewhere down there, my son was adjusting his tie, checking his watch, preparing to make the biggest mistake of his life. Not if I could help it. The hallway to the groom's room stretched before me like the longest walk of my life. My heels clicked against polished floors, each step carrying me closer to shattering my son's world. The phone felt heavy in my hand, warm from being clutched too tightly. Around me, the church hummed with pre-ceremony energy, laughter, last-minute instructions, the distant organist. 30 minutes. That's all the time left. I stopped outside the door marked Groom, pressing my palm against the cool wood for just a moment. 60 years of living, and I'd never felt less prepared. But there was no other choice. I knocked twice and opened the door. Jonathan stood before the mirror, adjusting his bow tie with focused concentration. His tuxedo fit perfectly. He looked like he had the morning of his medical school graduation, proud, nervous, ready for his future. Daniel Palmer, his best man and closest friend since their residency at MGH, sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when I entered. Mrs. Winters, the mother of the groom, looks beautiful. Jonathan turned and his face lit up. Mom, I was just thinking about you. He laughed, touching his collar. I can't get this damn tie right. The joy in his voice was a knife. Jonathan. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I need to speak with you, alone. The smile didn't fade immediately, but something shifted in his eyes. He glanced at Daniel, then back at me, reading my face. Mom, what's wrong? Daniel stood, phone disappearing. He'd been Jonathan's friend long enough to recognize the weight in the room. I'll just go check on the ushers. Thank you, Daniel. He squeezed Jonathan's shoulder as he passed, then slipped out. The click of the door closing sounded too final. "Mom," Jonathan moved toward me. "You're scaring me. What is it? Is someone hurt?" "No one's hurt." I held up a hand. "But I need you to listen to me. Really listen." His hands dropped from his tie, hanging loose at his sides. At 34, he was still my little boy, the one who'd climbed into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd called me crying when he lost his first patient, who'd trusted too easily. "Okay." His voice was quiet, now wary. "I'm listening. I need you to hear something before you walk down that aisle." I pulled my phone up between us. The screen showed the recording time-stamped 12:47 p.m. "Before you make vows you can't take back." His eyes moved from my face to the phone. "Mom, what are you talking about? The wedding starts in 30 minutes. "I know. That's why we're doing this now." "Doing what? What is that?" My throat tightened. "A recording. From earlier today, in the hallway outside the bridal suite." Something flickered across his face, not understanding yet, but the beginning of dread. The way a patient's expression changes when the doctor walks in with bad news. A recording of what? I extended the phone toward him, my hand remarkably steady. In 60 years, I'd made thousands of difficult decisions, but nothing had ever felt like this. "Press play," I said, my voice breaking on the second word. "And then you tell me if you still want to walk down that aisle." His hand reached out uncertain, hovering over the phone. Our eyes met, and in his I saw the last moment of innocence. "Press play, sweetheart." His hand reached for the phone fingers, closing around it slowly. For a moment, he just stared at the screen, at the timestamp, at the recording icon, at the play button that would change everything. Then he pressed it. The room filled with sound. Static first, then voices. Clear enough to understand, intimate enough to know they hadn't meant to be overheard. A man's voice, unfamiliar. "So you're really going through with this?" Jonathan's brow furrowed. He glanced at me, confused. Then Natalie's voice. "Of course. Why wouldn't I?" "Everything's falling into place." I watched him freeze, his eyes fixed on the phone, his whole body going still. The man again. "But what about his mother? Barbara's no fool." Jonathan's eyes snapped to mine. His mother. They were talking about me. Barbara. Natalie's laugh came through the speaker, dismissive. "Please, she thinks I'm perfect for him. That woman is so desperate for Jonathan to settle down, she'd accept anyone." The color started draining from his face. Not all at once, but slowly, the healthy tone fading to something gray waxy. And Jonathan, his name, in Natalie's mouth, but in a voice he'd never heard her use. Cold. Calculating. Jonathan is naive. His hand started shaking. Small tremors at first, then stronger, the phone wavering in his grip. I stepped closer, ready to catch it. Sweet, brilliant, and completely naive. He has no idea what's happening. I'm only after the money. His mother is worth $80 million. The phone clattered onto the desk. Jonathan's finger had found the pause button, pressed it hard. The room fell silent except for our breathing minds steady from 60 years of practice, his ragged and too fast. "Oh, this can't be real." His voice came out hoarse. He looked at me, desperate hope in his eyes that this was a mistake. When was this? "Earlier today, 12:47. We were." His hands pressed against his temples. "Where?" "The side hallway near the bridal suite. I heard them talking. I recorded it because I knew you'd need proof." "Them." He looked back at the phone like it was a bomb. "Who is that? Who is she talking to?" "I don't know his name, but you need to hear the rest." "The rest," he said it flatly. "There's more." "Yes." He stared at the phone. His bow tie hung crooked, now forgotten. His perfect wedding day appearance was crumbling, jacket-creased hair, mussed face, still that horrible gray. "Jonathan." I moved closer, my hand finding his shoulder. At 60, I'd learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to soften the truth. You need to hear all of it. Before you make any decisions, you need to know exactly what you're dealing with. "What I'm dealing with?" His laugh was bitter. "My fiancée, talking about me like I'm some kind of mark, like I'm stupid." "You're not stupid, you're trusting. There's a difference." His eyes met mine, and for a moment he looked exactly like he had at 8 years old, coming to me with a scraped knee needing me to make it better. But I couldn't make this better. I could only stand here while the truth destroyed him. "Keep listening," I said softly. "All of it." His hand hovered over the phone. Then, trembling so badly I could see it from where I stood, he reached out and pressed play. Natalie's voice filled the room again, and I watched my son's world break apart. He pressed play again. I watched my son's face as Natalie's voice filled the small room once more, past the lines he'd already heard into territory that would break what remained of his composure. "Jonathan is naive, sweet, brilliant, and completely naive." His jaw clenched. "I'm only after the money his mother is worth $80 million. His knuckles went white against the phone. Then came the line I knew would gut him. "Jonathan thinks love is about promises and commitment, but I know real love is defined by names on property deeds and inheritance clauses. He gave me his heart. I just needed him to sign the papers." The phone slipped from his hands, clattering onto the desk. "I gave her my heart," he whispered, "and she wanted me to sign papers." "Keep listening," I said gently. "There's more." He picked up the phone with shaking hands. His face had gone from gray to ashen. Derek's voice continued, "And the pregnancy. The pregnancy." Natalie's laugh was light dismissive. "It's already done. I'm 8 weeks along." 8 weeks, Jesus, Natalie. Does he know? "Of course not. We'll find out together in a few weeks." Very romantic, very unplanned. Jonathan's breathing changed. Shorter. Faster. I saw him doing the math, 8 weeks, 2 months, the timeline that didn't add up. "And it's yours, obviously, not Jonathan's." The sound that came from my son wasn't quite a gasp, wasn't quite a sob. It was something worse, the sound of a man's foundation cracking beneath him. "But we haven't been intimate in over 2 months. Natalie's voice continued careless and cruel. "He's been so busy with his research, so understanding about me being exhausted. He has no idea the exhaustion is first trimester fatigue from your baby, not his. And he'll just believe it's his. Men like Jonathan believe what they want to believe. He'll do the math wrong, convince himself the timing works because the alternative is too painful to consider." The recording shifted, rustling sounds, laughter, the unmistakable sound of kissing. Jonathan dropped the phone again. This time he didn't pick it up. He collapsed into the chair, head in his hands, shoulders shaking. "She's pregnant with his baby," he said into his palms. "She was going to tell me it was mine. She was going to make me raise another man's child while they... I moved to him, rested my hand on his back. 60 years had taught me that some pain needed presence, not words. I gave her everything." He choked out. "I trusted her. I put her on the condo deed because she said it meant I trusted her future, our future, together. And the whole time she just needed my signature. I know. The baby isn't mine. It's his, Derek's." He looked up at me, eyes red-rimmed and desperate. 2 months, Mom. We haven't been together in 2 months because she said she was tired, stressed about the wedding. And I believed her. I was understanding. I was patient. And the whole time she was pregnant with someone else's baby. The recording had ended. The room felt too small, too quiet, the weight of betrayal crushing the air from it. "What do I do?" His voice cracked. "Everyone's out there, 200 people. The ceremony starts in 18 minutes. What do I do?" I looked at my son, my brilliant, kind, devastated son, and I didn't have an answer. But we needed to find one, fast. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Jonathan stared at his hands, still trembling. Then he looked up. I could just not go out there. Send someone to tell them it's canceled. Deal with Natalie privately. Avoid the whole spectacle. I understood the instinct. At 60, I'd learned that our first response to humiliation is usually to hide. But I'd also learned what happens when we let people like Natalie walk away quietly. "You could do that," I said carefully. "But if we do this quietly, she'll do it to someone else." His eyes met mine. "She'll move on, Jonathan, find another man, another family, and she'll do this all over again because she got away with it." I leaned forward. "You have proof, real proof. That recording could save someone else from what she just did to you." You think I should tell everyone in front of 200 people? I think you should consider what happens if you don't." He pressed his palms against his temples, thinking. Before he could answer, a knock came at the door. Jonathan Daniels' voice, tentative. "Can I come in?" Jonathan looked at me. I nodded. "Yeah." Daniel entered, and his face shifted immediately from concern to alarm. "What happened?" His eyes moved between us. "Should I get Natalie?" "No." The word came out sharp. Jonathan stood unsteady. "Dan, I need to tell you something." I watched as my son, voice breaking, told his best friend everything. Daniel's face went through the same progression: confusion, disbelief, horror, rage. What? Daniel's hands curled into fists. "Jonathan, that's fraud. That's criminal." "I know." "And the baby." Daniel looked sick. "But you said you guys hadn't been—" "Yeah, now I know why." Daniel moved closer, gripping Jonathan's shoulder hard. "Whatever you need, I'm here." Jonathan nodded. "You can't let her get away with this," Daniel said, voice low and fierce. "People need to know what she is. She can't just walk out and do this to someone else." The same words I'd used. I saw them land differently this time, not from his mother, but from his closest friend. Jonathan was quiet. Then his jaw set, and I saw something shift behind his eyes. Not the broken man from minutes ago, but someone finding solid ground. "I want everyone to know." His voice was steadier now. "I want them to hear it. Hear what she really is." He looked at me. "She doesn't get to just walk away from this." Relief and pride filled my chest. "Then we'll tell them." "How?" I'd been thinking about this since the moment I pressed record. "The ceremony hasn't started yet. I'll go to the sanctuary, I'll stop it, and I'll make sure everyone hears that recording." Jonathan shook his head. "Mom, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering." I stood my hand, finding his face for just a moment. "Let me do this. Let me protect you one more time." His eyes filled again, but he nodded. The organ music started then, distant but unmistakable. Pachelbel's canon floating down the hallway. 1 p.m. The ceremony was beginning. Jonathan and I looked at each other. No more time for planning. No more time for second thoughts. It was time to move. The organ swelled as I made my way toward the sanctuary. Through the doors, I could see guests rising from their pews, craning their necks toward the side entrance, where the groom should have been entering by now. But there was no groom. I slipped into the back of the sanctuary, positioning myself near the wall, where I could see everything. The music continued Pachelbel's canon, the traditional processional, playing to an audience that was beginning to realize something was wrong. At the far end of the center aisle, Natalie stood in her wedding gown. Even from this distance, I could see it was exquisite ivory silk, fitted perfectly, the kind of dress that cost more than most people's cars. She held her bouquet with both hands, white roses and peonies trembling slightly. Her smile was fixed in place, but her eyes kept darting toward the side door where Jonathan should have appeared. The guests whispered. Heads turned. Phones came out, not for photos, but to check the time to text, to capture whatever drama was unfolding. Angela Martinez rushed past me, her headset askew, clipboard clutched to her chest. She whispered urgently to Pastor Thomas, who stood at the altar looking increasingly uncomfortable. He nodded, and Angela disappeared down the hallway toward the groom's room. 2 minutes passed. 3. The organ continued, but the organist was clearly improvising now, stretching out the melody, filling time that shouldn't need to be filled. Natalie's smile began to crack. She leaned toward her bridesmaid, Emily the teacher, who seemed genuinely sweet and completely unaware of what her friend really was. Natalie whispered something, and Emily's face creased with concern. She squeezed Natalie's arm, reassuring. In the third row, I spotted him. Derek, the man from the recording. He wore a dark suit, looked respectable enough, but his leg bounced with nervous energy. His phone was in his hand, thumb moving rapidly. Texting. I watched Natalie's hand slip into the hidden pocket of her dress, then quickly withdraw. She'd felt the vibration. His message. The whispers grew louder. What's happening? Where's the groom? Is he okay? At 2:07, Angela returned, her face carefully neutral, but her eyes worried. She approached Pastor Thomas, whispered in his ear. He nodded, stepped forward, and raised his hands for quiet. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a brief delay. If you could please remain seated, we'll begin shortly. A brief delay, as if the groom running late for his own wedding was normal. But the guests knew better. The murmurs intensified. A few people stood stretching, checking phones more openly. Someone near the front laughed nervously, then fell silent when others looked. Natalie stood frozen at the end of the aisle, her perfect bride facade crumbling. Her breathing had become visible, shallow, quick. Emily tried to guide her to a seat, but Natalie shook her head sharply. No. She would stand. She would wait. Whatever was happening, she would maintain control. Except she had no control, not anymore. I took a breath, feeling the weight of my phone in my pocket, the recording that would end this charade. Jonathan had made his choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. I stepped away from the wall into the side aisle. My heels clicked against the marble floor and heads turned. Guests who'd known me for years watched as I walked toward the front of the sanctuary, my path intersecting with the center aisle where Natalie stood. "Barbara," someone whispered. I kept walking, steady, purposeful. 60 years of boardroom negotiations had taught me how to command a room, and this sanctuary was no different. Natalie's eyes found mine. For just a second, her mask slipped completely. Confusion. Then something darker. Fear. She knew. Somehow she knew. I reached the front of the sanctuary and turned to face the congregation. 200 faces looked back at me, colleagues, friends, family, strangers, who'd come to celebrate what they thought was love. All of them waiting, all of them about to learn the truth. The sanctuary fell silent. 200 people, 200 held breaths, waiting for me to explain why the mother of the groom was standing where the ceremony should be happening. I didn't make them wait long. There will be no wedding today. My voice carried through the sanctuary, steady and clear. At 60, I'd learned how to project authority without shouting, how to command attention with certainty rather than volume. The reaction was immediate. Gasps. A collective intake of breath that rippled through the pews like a wave. Heads whipped toward Natalie, then back to me, then to each other. "What?" Natalie's voice cut through the shock, sharp and panicked. She took several steps forward, her dress trailing behind her. "What are you talking about? Where's Jonathan? What did you do?" I met her eyes. This woman who'd spent 18 months playing my son, playing all of us. Her mask was cracking fast now, the sweet bride facade giving way to something harder, more desperate. "My son is safe," I said, still calm, still controlled. "And he knows the truth." "The truth?" Natalie's laugh was brittle, performative. She looked at the guests playing to them now. "The truth is that his mother has lost her mind. This is insane. Someone needs to—" She spun toward Pastor Thomas. "Do something. She can't do this." Pastor Thomas stepped forward, his hands raised in a calming gesture. "Barbara, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No." The word was quiet but absolute. I looked at him, this man who'd known my family for years. No more privacy, no more quiet discussions. That's how people like her keep getting away with it. Natalie's face went white. "People like me, how dare you?" But I wasn't looking at her anymore. I was looking at Derek 3 rows back, who had risen from his seat. He was moving toward the side aisle, trying to slip out unnoticed, while everyone's attention was on the drama at the front. "I wouldn't leave if I were you," I said, my voice carrying across the sanctuary. Every head turned to follow my gaze. "This concerns you, too." Derek froze. His face, handsome, smooth, the kind of face that probably helped him in his line of work, went carefully blank. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a guest. I should let the family handle—" "You're not just a guest." I looked back at the congregation. That man is Derek Sullivan, and he and Natalie have been working together for quite some time. The whispers exploded. Natalie's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. Derek stood trapped in the aisle, caught between staying and running, knowing either choice condemned him. "This is ridiculous." Natalie finally managed, her voice climbing higher. "I don't even know him. Barbara has clearly had some kind of breakdown. The stress of the wedding, maybe, or—" "I have a recording," I said simply. The sanctuary went dead silent. Natalie's face transformed. Fear. Real, genuine fear. A recording of what? Of you and Derek, from earlier today, discussing your plans for my son, discussing the $80 million you've been after since the day you met him. Discussing. I paused, letting the weight build. Discussing whose baby you're really carrying. Someone near the front gasped. Emily, the bridesmaid, stepped away from Natalie like she'd been burned. Natalie reached for her, but Emily shook her head, backing up. "That's a lie," Natalie said, but her voice had lost its strength. "You're lying. You couldn't have, there's no—" "Before anyone leaves," I said, raising my voice to carry over her protests, over the rising murmur of the crowd. "You all deserve to hear why there will be no wedding today." I looked toward the sound booth at the back of the sanctuary where the technician sat, frozen, his hand hovering over the controls. "Play it," I said. "All of it. If you're still here, make a prediction. How do you think Natalie will react when that recording plays? Will she deny it, run, or break down? Comment below. Let's see who guesses correctly. Quick transparency note: what follows includes dramatized storytelling elements. Some details have been fictionalized, though the core lessons about recognizing manipulation remain genuine. If you need strictly factual content, feel free to exit. For everyone else, let's watch what happens when the truth comes out. The technician pressed play. Static crackled through the sanctuary speakers, then cleared. Natalie's voice, crystal clear, unmistakable, filled the space where 200 people sat in stunned silence. "Of course, why wouldn't I? Everything's falling into place." Heads turned toward the bridal suite entrance where Natalie stood frozen. I watched her face drain of color. Derek's voice came next. "But what about his mother? Barbara's no fool." Gasps rippled through the pews. People pulled out phones. Some were already recording. Natalie's recorded laugh echoed through the sanctuary. "Barbara, please. She thinks I'm perfect for him." The guests who'd attended Sunday dinners, who'd celebrated her engagement, who'd bought gifts from her registry. They sat motionless, listening to her mock the woman who'd welcomed her into the family. Jonathan is naive. Sweet, brilliant, and completely naive. He has no idea what's happening. I'm only after the money. His mother is worth $80 million. The sanctuary erupted. Voices overlapped, shock, outrage, disbelief. 80 million, Jesus, and he just gives you access. Not yet. That's what the marriage is for. Natalie lurched toward the sound booth, heels clicking frantically on marble. Derek rose from his pew, face white. But the recording continued, relentless. "I've already got him to put me on the condo deed." "No," Natalie shouted, pushing through the center aisle. "Turn it off. This isn't..." Her voice from the speakers cut through her protests. "Jonathan thinks love is about promises and commitment, but I know real love is defined by names on property deeds and inheritance clauses. He gave me his heart. I just needed him to sign the papers." The sanctuary went silent. Then someone screamed. Another person cursed. Emily, the maid of honor, stood up in the front row, staring at Natalie with horror. That single line, hearts versus signatures, love versus legal documents, had crystallized everything. The manipulation, the calculation, the cold transactional nature of what should have been sacred. "You said you loved him," Emily's voice rang out. "You said he was your soulmate." Natalie kept moving toward the sound booth, but Daniel stepped into the aisle, blocking her path. 2 groomsmen flanked him. The recording played on. "The pregnancy, it's already done. I'm 8 weeks along." New gasps. Louder. Jonathan's colleagues from the hospital exchanged horrified looks. "And it's yours, obviously, not Jonathan's." The sanctuary exploded. People jumped to their feet. Phones were everywhere now, recording Natalie's mortified face, Derek's failed attempt to slip toward the side exit, the chaos unfolding in real time. "But we haven't been intimate in over 2 months." Natalie's voice continued from the speakers, indifferent and cruel. "He has no idea the exhaustion is first trimester fatigue from your baby, not his." Pastor Thomas stood at the altar, mouth open, unable to process what he was hearing. Men like Jonathan believe what they want to believe. He'll do the math wrong, convince himself the timing works because the alternative is too painful to consider. The kissing sounds came next, intimate, damning, undeniable. Someone vomited in a back pew. The recording ended with Natalie's laugh fading to static. Silence crashed down like a wave. Then chaos, pure chaos. Voices shouting, people crying, the sound of 200 witnesses processing betrayal in real time. Natalie stood halfway down the aisle, frozen in her ivory dress bouquet, crushed in her white-knuckled grip. Derek had stopped trying to run. There was nowhere to go. Everyone had heard. Everyone knew. What followed was immediate and total chaos. Natalie stood in the center aisle, her wedding dress now a costume of lies. Her face cycled through emotions, denial, first her mouth opening and closing. "That's not you edited it. That recording is fake." But no one was listening. The congregation had erupted, people standing, pointing, some moving toward her, others backing away. Derek tried to run. The moment the recording ended, he'd bolted for the side exit. But Daniel and the groomsmen blocked his path. "Let me through," Derek said, voice tight. "Stay right here and face what you did," Daniel replied, arms crossed. Derek looked around wildly, but there was no escape. Emily stepped forward, tears streaming. "You used me too. I introduced you to my friends. I trusted you." Natalie reached for her. "Em, please." "Don't touch me," Emily jerked back. "You're exactly what that recording says you are." The guests were on their phones now, posting, texting, the digital wildfire starting, the story spreading faster than Natalie and Derek could run. An elderly woman stood. "I gave that girl $5,000 as a wedding gift for a fraud." Others joined in, boutique customers, Jonathan's colleagues. The voices overlapped, building into righteous anger. Then Jonathan entered. The sanctuary doors opened and my son walked in. Not the broken man from before, but someone who'd found his spine. He moved through the crowd, which parted, and stood beside me. His presence changed the room. The voices quieted. This was the man they'd come to see married, the man who'd been betrayed. Natalie saw him and desperation flared in her eyes. She pushed past Emily's dress, dragging, trying to reach him. "Jonathan, please, you have to listen. Your mother twisted everything. She's trying to control you." "Stop!" Jonathan's voice was quiet but sharp. "Just stop." "But I'm pregnant." Natalie's voice climbed to hysteria. "I'm pregnant. You can't do this to a pregnant woman." "Pregnant with Derek's baby." I said calm and clear. "Not my son's." Natalie's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The truth sat between us, undeniable, witnessed by 200 people. She looked at Derek, still trapped by the groomsmen. He wouldn't meet her eyes. His face had gone gray. "We should go," Derek said, barely audible. "Natalie, we need to leave." For a moment, she didn't move. Then something broke. The mask shattered completely. Her shoulders sagged, her face crumpled, and she wasn't a bride anymore. Just a woman who'd been caught. She gathered her dress in shaking hands and turned toward the side exit. Derek followed the groomsmen, stepping aside. No one stopped them. There was nothing left to say. They walked through the side door together, the con artist and her accomplice, leaving behind a sanctuary full of people who would never forget. The door closed behind them. They were gone. Once they were gone, the real work began. Pastor Thomas led Jonathan and me to his office away from the sanctuary where guests were still processing what they'd witnessed. The room was quiet, lined with books, a refuge from the chaos. "I've called a lawyer," Pastor Thomas said. "He's on his way." At 60, I'd learned that emotion was for the crisis. Afterward came strategy. The lawyer arrived within 20 minutes, Marcus Webb, someone I'd worked with before. He took one look at Jonathan and got straight to business. "Tell me everything." We did. Jonathan laid out the timeline, the financial exploitation, the co-signed loan, the condo deed, the pregnancy lie. I played portions of the recording. Marcus listened, taking notes. "This is fraud, multiple counts." "What do we do?" Jonathan asked. "First, we protect you. Restraining order. Both of them. We file today." We spent the next hour signing papers, giving statements. Marcus made calls to the police, to the court. The machinery of justice began to turn. The condo deed. Jonathan's voice was quiet. "We'll contest it. Given the fraud, we can get her removed. A few weeks, but you'll get your property back. And the loan? Trickier since you co-signed, but given the recording, the intent to defraud, we can make a case. She'll be liable for repayment." By the time we left, the sun had shifted lower, the sanctuary was empty, guests gone with their stories. The wedding that never was. I drove Jonathan to my house in Beacon Hill. He sat silent, staring out the window. "Mom?" "Yes." "Thank you." I squeezed his hand. That's what mothers do. The next 3 days blurred together. Police report filed, restraining orders granted. Jonathan moved into my guest room, unable to face his condo where Natalie's things still remained. Marcus called on day 3. The paternity test. We need it. Derek's claiming the baby might still be Jonathan's. Jonathan went pale but nodded. Set it up. The test was quick, a cheek swab processed downtown. We waited 2 days for results we already knew but needed proven. The email came while we sat in my kitchen drinking coffee. Marcus's message was brief. 99.9% probability. Derek Sullivan is the biological father. Jonathan set down his cup. Good. Good. I needed to know for sure. Not just from a recording, but science. He looked at me. She really was going to trap me with someone else's kid. Yes, and I almost let her. You trusted someone you loved. That's not weakness. He was quiet. How long before I stop feeling stupid? You're not stupid. It'll take time, but you will stop feeling this way. A week after the wedding that wasn't, Marcus called again. Papers served, fraud charges, civil suit for restitution. Natalie Harper and Derek Sullivan both received them this morning. How did they react? Natalie's lawyer is negotiating. Derek's gone silent. Neither is disputing the facts anymore. Because they couldn't. Not with 200 witnesses. Not with a paternity test proving their lie. Jonathan was on my back porch when I found him. Late afternoon sun caught his face, and for the first time in a week, he looked less haunted. It's really over, isn't it? The worst part is the legal stuff will take time, but yes. He nodded slowly. I should feel more relieved. You will, eventually. Right now you're allowed to feel exhausted. And we were. Both of us. Exhausted but standing. The truth was out. Justice was in motion. The healing could begin. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in patience and paperwork. Marcus filed the civil suit 2 weeks after the wedding. Fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, restitution for financial losses. The documents were thick, detailed, damning. Every text, every financial transaction, every lie documented and cataloged. This is airtight, Marcus said, sliding the papers across his desk for me to review. The recording alone would be enough, but with the paternity test, the financial evidence, the witness testimony from 200 guests, they don't have a defense. Jonathan sat beside me, quieter than he used to be, but steadier. How long will it take? Months, maybe a year for full resolution. But the criminal investigation is already moving faster. That was the part that surprised even me. The police had taken the case seriously, fraud conspiracy, attempted theft. But as they dug deeper, they found more. Natalie Harper wasn't Natalie Harper. Not originally. She'd changed her name twice in the past 5 years. Before Boston, she'd been Natalie Ross in Seattle. Before that, Natalie Brennan in Connecticut. There was another victim, Marcus said during our meeting in week 3, a man in Seattle. Similar pattern, wealthy, naive, she got pregnant, he married her, then she cleaned out his accounts and disappeared after 8 months. Jonathan's face went white. She's done this before, at least once that we can prove, probably more. The Seattle victim filed a police report, but she'd vanished by then, changed her name, moved to Connecticut, then eventually to Boston. And Derek, I asked, he's been with her the whole time. Different names, different roles, sometimes a brother, sometimes a business partner, but always there. They're professionals. The restitution came slowly but surely. The condo deed was the easiest. Marcus filed an emergency motion, and within 3 weeks, Natalie's name was removed. Jonathan's property legally and fully again. The $60,000 loan took longer. Natalie claimed she'd used the money for legitimate business expenses that Jonathan had given it willingly. But the recording proved intent to defraud, and the judge wasn't sympathetic. She was ordered to repay in full with interest. Whether she'd actually be able to was another question. The boutique rent $18,000 came back within 6 weeks. The building owner, horrified to learn his tenant was a con artist, voluntarily returned the payments Jonathan had made. The restraining orders held. Natalie tried to call Jonathan twice in the first month. Both times Marcus documented it, both times the police were notified. She didn't try again. By 6 weeks, their relationship had imploded. Derek's lawyer leaked to the press that Natalie had manipulated him too, that he'd been coerced. Natalie's lawyer fired back that Derek was the mastermind. They turned on each other with the same ruthless efficiency they'd once used on their victims. The baby was born 8 weeks after the wedding, a boy. Derek refused to see him, refused to sign the birth certificate, refused to pay child support despite the DNA test proving paternity. Natalie was alone, broke facing criminal charges with an infant she'd conceived as a weapon. I didn't feel sorry for her. I'd used up all my sympathy. 2 months after the day that should have been Jonathan's wedding, he came downstairs for breakfast and said, "I think I need to talk to someone, a therapist." I looked up from my coffee. That's a good idea. I keep thinking about it, all of it, how I didn't see it, how I let her. He stopped. "I need help processing this." "Then we'll find you someone good." We did. Dr. Sarah Bennett, a psychologist who specialized in trauma and relationship abuse. Jonathan started seeing her twice a week. The healing I knew from 60 years of living would take far longer than the legal proceedings, but at least it had begun. Justice was slow, but it was coming. The legal proceedings would take months to fully resolve, but Jonathan's healing couldn't wait. 2 weeks after filing the suit, he sat across from Dr. Sarah Bennett in her office on Commonwealth Avenue. Twice a week, every week. At first, he could barely speak about what had happened. Doctor. Bennett, a specialist in relational trauma, didn't push. She let him sit in silence, let him cry, let him rage. The hardest part, he told me one evening over dinner, is realizing how many red flags I ignored. We'd started a new ritual Sunday dinners at my place. Just the two of us. No phones, no distractions. The kind of honest communication we should have had all along. You weren't ignoring them, I said, passing him the roasted vegetables. You were trusting someone you loved. That's not a character flaw, Jonathan. That's being human. He was learning to recognize the patterns now. Love bombing, financial entanglement, isolation. The textbook signs of manipulation that Dr. Bennett walked him through session by session. He kept a journal. He read books on emotional abuse. He was rebuilding himself from the inside out. "I'm not dating for at least a year," he announced one Sunday in late spring. "Maybe longer." "Good," I said. He'd also set strict boundaries around his finances. No joint accounts, no co-signing, no access to property deeds until marriage, and even then with a prenuptial agreement. I'd raised my son to be generous, but Natalie had taught him to be cautious. Some lessons I thought come at a brutal cost. Daniel remained a constant presence. He'd bring takeout on weeknights, watch games with Jonathan, never once saying, "I told you so," even though he'd sensed something off about Natalie from the beginning. That's what real friendship looked like. Meanwhile, Natalie's world had collapsed entirely. Her boutique in the South End closed within 6 weeks. The story had spread not just through word of mouth, but through social media. Someone had filmed part of the sanctuary confrontation. The recording, the pregnancy lie, the financial manipulation, all of it went viral. Her reputation was destroyed. I felt no satisfaction in that, only a grim acknowledgement that actions have consequences. Derek, true to form, had vanished. No child support, no acknowledgement of paternity despite the DNA test. The baby, a girl I'd heard was born in early summer, and Natalie was raising her alone, her family helping reluctantly. I suspected they'd heard the recording too. I didn't follow her story closely. My focus was on my son. By the end of the second month, Jonathan had moved back into his own condo. Not because I'd asked him to leave, I would have let him stay as long as he needed, but because he was ready. He was sleeping through the night again. He'd returned to work at MGH, throwing himself into his research with renewed focus. "I think the work helps," he admitted. "Reminds me I'm good at something, that I have value beyond what she tried to take." 3 months after the wedding that never happened, we sat on my back patio with coffee and pastries from the North End. The morning was warm, the city humming with life below us. Jonathan looked lighter than he had in months. Not healed, not yet, but healing. "I can breathe again, Mom," he said quietly. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You're going to be okay," I told him. Better than okay. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. 6 months have passed since the wedding that never happened. People still ask me if I have regrets, if I wish I'd handled it differently, told Jonathan privately, let him cancel quietly, spared him the public humiliation. The answer is no. If I'd stayed silent, Natalie would have married my son. She'd have legal access to everything he'd worked for, everything I'd built. And when she'd extracted what she wanted, she would have disappeared, taking his money, his dignity, and quite possibly his child that wasn't his. If I'd told him privately, she might have talked her way out of it. Manipulators are experts at that. She'd have cried, spun a story, convinced him the recording was taken out of context. And he might have believed her. Love makes us want to believe. The public exposure wasn't cruelty. It was necessity. It was 200 witnesses who could never let her rewrite the narrative. It was evidence that couldn't be denied or explained away. It was protection. I've learned some things in 60 years, and I'll share them here for anyone who needs to hear them. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, investigate. Don't let politeness or the desire to be liked silence that inner voice that's trying to protect you. Gather evidence. Gut feelings matter, but proof is power. That recording saved my son's life. Boundaries aren't cruel, they're essential. Real love doesn't demand access to your bank accounts, your property, or your autonomy. If someone pressures you to co-sign loans, add their name to deeds, or prove your love through money run. Watch for patterns. Love bombing, isolation, financial entanglement, manufactured urgency. These aren't signs of passion. They're manipulation tactics, and they're deliberate. Prenuptial agreements aren't unromantic. They're intelligent. If someone truly loves you, they'll understand. As for Jonathan, he's thriving. He's been promoted at MGH. His research on cardiac regeneration is groundbreaking, and he's traveling to conferences building a reputation that has nothing to do with scandal and everything to do with brilliance. He's dating again carefully, a pediatric surgeon named Rachel. They've been seeing each other for 6 weeks. She has her own career, her own home, her own life. They split checks. She's never asked him for money. He told me last week that he feels like himself again. Not the naive version who ignored red flags, but a stronger version who knows his worth. "I'm glad you did it, Mom," he said over Sunday dinner. "I'm glad you didn't let me make the biggest mistake of my life." That's all I needed to hear. This morning we met for coffee at a cafe in Beacon Hill. The autumn sun filtered through the windows, and Jonathan laughed, really laughed at some story Daniel had told him the night before. His face was relaxed, open, free. I watched my son across the table and felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace. The legal battle wrapped up last month. Natalie and Derek settled, returned what they could, and faded into whatever lives people like that build on ashes. I don't think about them anymore. I think about the people who matter. Jonathan, Daniel, the families I might have saved by showing what manipulation looks like when you shine a light on it. Some people will call me cruel for what I did that day at Trinity Church, for stopping a wedding in front of 200 guests and exposing a woman's lies for everyone to hear. But I call it love, and I'd do it again. Looking back at what I did that day, I know God guided me to protect my son when he couldn't see the danger. Some might say I was harsh, but I believe God's wisdom showed me the truth in time. Don't be like me. Don't wait until the wedding day to act. Trust your instincts earlier, gather evidence sooner, and speak up before it's too late. The lessons I learned. Family drama stories like ours teach that maternal love sometimes requires courage over comfort. Boundaries protect the ones we love. Grandma stories aren't just entertainment. They're warnings. When you hear grandma stories about manipulation, pay attention. These family drama stories happen every day to real families, and grandma stories like mine exist so you can learn from them. Family drama stories teach us red flags, love bombing, financial control, isolation, manufactured urgency. God has shown me that silence enables harm, but truth sets people free. If you found value here, please subscribe, and share with someone who needs it. Comment what lesson resonated most. Final note: Content contains dramatized storytelling elements for educational purposes. Some details are fictional, but the core lessons about recognizing financial and emotional abuse are real. If this style doesn't suit you, that's okay. Please feel free to seek content that better fits your needs.